Our opening remarks will come from Hernan Albamonte. He's the head of illicit trade prevention at Philip Morris International, where he has been fighting the war on all sorts of illicit trade, whether it's at the border or on the internet. Hernan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you all for joining us today for this important conversation. My name is Hernan Albamonte, and I'm the head of illicit trade prevention in the US for Philip Morris International. And at PMI, we have a dedicated global team of illegal trade prevention professionals that are working very hard every day to combat illegal trade and the related crimes. We have invested significant resources to ensure strong controls in our supply chain and raise awareness of the consequences of illegal trade and try to develop workable solutions joined with governments and other organizations to fight crime. So essentially, fighting illicit trade is part of our DNA. Now, my company is today committed to delivering a smoke-free future, which completely replaces cigarette sales with smoke-free alternatives that are better choices for adults who would otherwise continue to smoke. And tackling illegal trade of tobacco is a cornerstone of our smoke-free future. As part of our effort to combat illegal trade, we have brought together a coalition of national and state brand enforcement experts, law enforcement agencies, and leading business organizations called United to Safeguard America from Illegal Trade, or USA-IT for short. By working together through USA-IT, we are providing local officials, law enforcement, and other leaders with information and training programs to help tackle illegal trade and raising public awareness on the consequences inflicted on states and municipalities by black market profiteers. Now, illegal trade is not a petty crime. Illegal trade undermines democracy, it corrodes the rule of law, it jeopardizes economic growth development strategies, it contributes to human rights abuses, and it inflames violent conflicts. It is a growing threat to our national security and impacts every law-abiding American. These criminals who engage in illegal trade are cunning and violent and will commit murder to hold and expand their illicit markets. Operating with such impunity enables these groups to fund their operations and establish and sustain trade routes for trafficking across the country. They are nimble enough to avoid law enforcement, enterprising enough to continually establish new revenue streams and recruit vulnerable citizens, and they are dynamic enough in their execution of their criminal enterprise. Now, black market activity steals revenues from legitimate businesses and governments, preventing communities from making the necessary investments to stimulate economic growth, particularly during these hard economic times. In 2019, just as an example, counterfeit products alone robbed the US economy more than $131 billion and more than 3,025 jobs as well. Those revenues should have been used to build roads to facilitate commerce, help hospitals to fight the pandemic outbreaks, or improve our schools. Instead, criminals are getting rich. With the rapid increase in e-commerce, cybercrime is another source of income for criminal enterprises, from fraudulent schemes like phishing attacks and ransomware to selling counterfeit and stolen products online through marketplaces where we usually order from every day. There are a multitude of ways for criminals to earn profits, all of which jeopardizes American security and prosperity. Illegal trade and cybercrime take many nefarious forms and are connected by shadowy webs of bad actors. But no single company, industry, or government can address this complex problem on its own. Tackling it requires cooperation and public-private partnerships, making full use of existing expertise, information sharing, innovation solutions, and evolving technologies. Public actors, the private sector, and civil society alike all have a role to play. In closing, we would be very happy to connect with you to discuss this issue in more detail and introduce you to national security and law enforcement experts as well. And I would like also to thank you now for joining this important session and also to InsideSources for holding this important and relevant discussion. Now back to you, Michael.
Thanks so much. And yes, that number was $131 billion. And one of the stories that was we were going over and preparing for this was the story we've all seen of the mass robberies at CVS's and retailers around the country. And I had no idea that part of that is fed by the pipeline that's been created for internet online sales of stolen goods. It's kind of the bizarre version of supply side economics. And so it's a real live issue. Thank you, Hernan. Now let's go to Bill Schenkelberg. He's with Red Sky Alliance, and he's going to talk about the part of the world of cybercrime that he deals with every day. Bill, you want to hit your camera, and let's go.
All right. Well, thank you much, Mike, and thank Hernan for inviting me to this distinguished panel on illegal trade. Illegal trade is a very serious problem, and a problem which is on an international scale that costs millions in lost revenue and important state and national tax dollars. Next slide. I'll wait till you get the slide up.
Yeah, just 1 second on the slide there.
All right.
While we're waiting for the slide, just a quick 2 or 3 sentences on Red Sky Alliance, Bill.
Yeah, what we do is we actually collect and analyze information from the dark web, and that's what I'm going to be talking real briefly about today. And then what we do through our collection methods is we provide that information, stolen information, or any information relevant to that company, that information back to the companies and clients that we have. So we've been doing that for almost 10 years now. So that's kind of what we do here at Red Sky Alliance.
And what's been the biggest change in those 10 years?
On the corporate side of things, I see that a lot of the big companies now are much better protected internally with their firewalls and with their managed service security providers, and they've established their own SOC teams, and they're really doing a really good job with that. Where we're seeing now the intrusions are coming in through the supply line, which I'm going to talk about just real briefly here. So a lot of these companies are getting sophisticated, which is a good thing. But then there's the third-party people that have the challenges, and then through those third parties, they then get up into these bigger corporations and cause havoc.
Well, your slides are ready, so go ahead.
Okay, good. We're on slide 2. So my first recollection of illegal trade was during the early to mid 1990s. That's where many of the US-based latex glove manufacturers were moving their manufacturing operations over to Asia and Southeast Asian countries. This was a lot of, for economics at the time, but it also created a huge problem. So during this manufacturing transition period, a flood of construction-grade latex gloves were being rebranded, quote, for medical use and sold back into the United States. The vendors there were then selling them to medical facilities in the United States. That was during the height of the AIDS crisis running throughout the United States and other parts of the world. This illegal trade created numerous criminal investigations that, fortunately or unfortunately, consumed much of my life in the 5 years I was with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration Office of Criminal Investigations. Unapproved latex glove was obvious and a very serious public safety concern, both for individuals and for the medical community, because these gloves did not meet FDA safety standards. But latex gloves is not why you invited me to this panel here today. My invitation was to talk about the serious implications of cyber intrusions, forums and posts, and then lastly, sales within the illegal trade in the cyber, what I call the underground. Today, I'll be briefly explaining third-party cyber attacks, which we see are one of the biggest contributions into getting into a lot of these large corporations, and thus the intrusion into the supply chain network. And then I'm going to talk briefly about the illegal goods being sold in the dark web, which is seriously affecting companies and businesses and many levels of government. In the government, it's with lost tax revenue. So what are we seeing? In the supply chain is often where the current network intrusions occur from our analysis, our collection and analysis. And they're even targeting very secure companies, as I mentioned when I first started here. And second, and just as important, the sale of illegal and counterfeit products currently being sold in the dark web forums and marketplaces. And I have to emphasize illegal marketplaces. Slide 3, next slide. Bad latex gloves were a historical example of the supply chain manipulation and creating an illegal trade for that product. But before I proceed, I have to go back again and back in time to the 1990s and another case I was involved in, and that was with misbranded seafood investigations of bad shrimp. Back then, a very sharp FDA inspector discovered a bogus fax sent from India to a seafood company in Tampa, Florida. Next slide. Yes, faxes. That was the then cutting edge communication of the seafood industry, U.S. Customs officials, Customs House broker, and FDA inspection type documentation. The Indian shrimp was actually sent from an unapproved company over in India to the west coast of the United States, then sent via rail over to Tampa, Florida, and from there they were sold to vendors throughout the United States. Next slide. Well, that was then, and this is now. Everything now is cyber communication, and unfortunately, convenience has taken precedence over security. So now add to that already what we believe is somewhat poor cybersecurity with a lot of the different apps and even with a lot of networks. Add to that the corona pandemic from last year and the subsequent lockdowns. Employees were working at home. Working at home has catapulted cyber intrusions with some estimates over 200% increase. That percentage kind of varies from research to research, but it really doesn't matter. It's gone kind of crazy. Ransomware is being one of the current malware choices as within the last year and a half. So why is that? Those people working at home often did not, and some still don't have proper firewalls, and they lack the sophistication of proper cyber hygiene. What's cyber hygiene? That's using your passwords and managing them, changing them, making them difficult to copy, and then clicking on things that you shouldn't be clicking on, especially attachments, and scrutinizing that. And then in addition to that, a lot of these employees are sharing their Wi-Fi connections with those of their children, which has not produced very good results. The kids are gaming, they're chatting, and who knows where the kids were surfing on the net, which just brings in even more problems. So the hackers are really smart and they anticipate all this. Once they figure out all these vulnerabilities, they're off to the races. The employees, in essence, become a part of that company's business supply chain. Next slide. So what is the business, or what is the supply chain? So the standard definition is a supply chain in commerce is a chain of a system of organizations, people, activities, information, and resources involved supplying a product or service to a consumer. So cyber touches every single point of that supply chain. Many large companies do indeed have very good cyber protections, and that's a good thing, but that's not so along the supply chain. There is a kind of famous electric car manufacturer who in our collection we picked up on that they were actually being spoofed by an upholstery company, a small upholstery company within the United States, and they were trying to get into that company. That information was passed along for that company's protection, but that happens, and it happens in all different sectors and businesses. And we urge to use scrutiny with your supply chain vendors. So as an example, for the next slide, please. As an example, in the transportation supply chain, many products, and that's approximately 90% of all products, are shipped in the maritime environment. Water routes are the most economical, and then rail, land, and finally air transportation. An example of this attack on the supply chain was in 2019, the cyber attack on the shipping giant Maersk shippers. Maersk was hit with malware and the supply chain slowed, affecting ships, the shippers at all levels of transportation, and port facilities, who had to resort to handling the transportation supply chain using humans and paper documents, just like they did in the 1800s. That involved also, a lot of customs documents and even insurance type documentation. There's still a debate amongst analysts as to what actually hit Maersk at that time. Was it the malware or a cipher type malware, but it really doesn't matter. The supply chain of products and commodities came to a crawl. Maris estimated that the hack cost them about $3 million in losses, which may be a drop in the bucket for them, but it was a huge hassle for those products trying to make their way into market, and then the lost revenue all along the way. A weaker supply chain company could very well have been the path to this Maersk attack. In the past several years, our cybersecurity company has helped the maritime industry with vessel impersonation reports that have revealed numerous examples of hackers worldwide. One of the biggest ones we were seeing is attempting to spoof a vessel in order to illegally enter the transportation supply chain. Companies who feel secure with their networks need to seriously look at their vendors in this supply chain. The supply chain is not limited just to transportation, but really any industry and critical infrastructure and key resources. Next slide. Now into the dark web. The dark web is where stolen, illegal, and counterfeit goods in the dark web are escalating day by day. Our company has been monitoring the dark web for many years. Our current collection monitors dark web forums and dark web marketplaces, and we're actually up to 75 different forums and marketplaces within our company. So in the forums, now looking at the forums, what we see is conversations on how to in hacking, discussing targets for cyber attacks, solicitations for stolen data containing personal identifying information, or PII, which is important to a fraudster, and most important to the USA-IT, the sale of stolen and or counterfeit products. This takes us to the dark web market, where next is the dark web marketplaces. These are nothing more than places to go shopping for illegal products and stolen information. Dark web underground marketplaces are very similar to any legitimate online shopping sites where you could buy products. If you've ever been to sites like Amazon, eBay, Alibaba, and there's numerous other ones, you've been on and seen online shopping. The dark web marketplaces are really no different. Some are crude and some are more sophisticated. The only real difference is that these stores are on the Tor network, or as we call, in the onion. Sometimes people use that term, the onion, but that's what we call the dark web. It really doesn't matter. So if you find what you want and you have the means to pay it, it's yours. So next slide. Let's look at 3 examples of stolen and counterfeit products in the dark web sites. The first screenshot is from the dark web marketplace called White House. This specific post is selling German-based cigarettes, the West brand. West is owned by Imperial Tobacco, which is a UK company. Other brands that were seen on this site were Pall Mall, Corona, and Minsk cigarettes. The direct loss is to the Imperial and RJ Reynolds companies. And then there's also subsequent losses to the various states and federal tobacco tax laws. Then there's examples. The next one there is pharmaceutical drugs, which are sold in dark marketplaces. Some are stolen, some are diverted drugs, and some are actual counterfeit drugs. Regardless, a purchaser cannot and must not trust the safety and efficacy of these drugs. It's a major and huge public health risk. Next slide. A final example are the fake Louis Vuitton merchandise, which there's a lot of those. The screenshot there is actually from our collection, and you could see that that you can really we had a lot of hits in our collections on Louis Vuitton type products, which then took us to the underground marketplaces where we saw a huge amount. Louis Vuitton gets hit quite a bit. So as you can see from these examples, virtually everything and anything is being sold and marketed in dark web forums and marketplaces. Next slide. So what are the means to pay? The standard payment method for an underground purchase is normally through a Bitcoin type e-commerce payment. Many use Bitcoin, but there are other forms of e-payment methods like Ethereum, Monero, and Litecoin, and there are actually many others. Tracking the transfer of e-commerce is difficult, though not impossible, as in the example of the Colonial Pipeline, much of the ransomed payment was retrieved by the FBI. So they did actually a great job on that. So next slide. To conclude, the cyber age has created a very serious dimension for companies and businesses who try their best to combat illegal trade and counterfeit products. There's a serious loss of revenue and diminished product integrity with the whole illegal trade situation. Poor network security, either internally or with your supply chain, and what's going on in the dark web forums and marketplaces only compounds the growing problem of illegal trade. Thank you for your time today, and I'll pass it back to you, Mike.
Thanks so much. And I have several questions for you already, so don't go anywhere. Now let's go to Itai Galmore with Brand Shield, who's going to talk about his fight against cybercrime on the web. Itai?
Yeah. Oh, I was muted. Sorry. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you guys. I'm going to share my screen. Here you go. Just a sec.
Well, while you're doing that, why don't you tell us a little bit about Brand Shield, where you are, where you're from, etc.
Brilliant. So, my name is Itai Galmore. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at Brand Shield, and actually, I got a slide for it. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Brilliant. Is it like the full-size screen or the presenter?
It's big enough for me. But...
All right. So Brand Shield is a public company traded on the London Stock Exchange. We are a technology company. We've developed a technology that our own proprietary that uses AI-powered and big data to scan, crawl, and deal with online risks. Can be phishing, counterfeiting, brand protection, impersonation. That's about it. So basically that's what we do. These are the threats that we deal with. And out of all of these, I brought you a few examples that kind of explain how all of these scams, frauds, impersonation, lookalikes, phishing are actually connected to each other. Just like the last presentation that we saw, it's all connected, and it's really doesn't matter if it's facts from the 90s or cybersecurity. It's the idea is to steal money, a full scam and phish. So this is, for example, looks like a very authentic Levi's website with practically, and you can see this is the domain cheaplevisjacket.com. So is this a phishing site? Is this a counterfeit site? Actually, you might say it's both. And the thing is that we have worked with Levi's, for example, and the idea is that these cases are somewhere between, cybersecurity, legal, and marketing, and kind of we fill the cracks between all of them because nobody can really say what it is. The fact is that this case, and this is kind of an example, in April 2020, just I think when the COVID-19 has started, Levi's has viewed an increase of 100% in online phishing and fraud websites. So this looks like, it's a genuine website, or but actually, or in the worst case, it can be, selling replicas or counterfeits, which is horrible. But apparently, these websites are meant to take people details, credit cards, etc., and create different scams based on this details. So we managed to take down 100 phishing websites in a single month, all right? And we tracked around 420 cyber squatting events. And you can fight it, but it's in our business, it's called like the whack-a-mole effect. It's continuously, but you see fruits. And talking about COVID-19, this is actually quite an interesting analysis that we've made, and it talks about what about vaccines, and how can you track and see that there is indicators for illegal activity. So this is analysis that we've done based on domain registration containing the word vaccines. You can see a spike when the news about vaccines for the COVID-19 has been started to be relevant. So this is a huge surge. The reason that people buy domain registration with a vaccine is to create scams, all right? To create some kind of fraudulent activity, all right? And we can see that because actually BrandShield is helping most of the vaccination, if not all of them, of the COVID-19 vaccine companies, right? Whether it's Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, all of them. And you can see how scams have a little bit shifted from faxes and emails, which are really spear phishing, and email phishing is kind of the obvious ones, but it's really shifted into social media, all right? Social media, social phishing, social schemes is the place where it happens. And we saw a huge increase during the last year or year and a half, crazy. And you can see that things are sold on eBay, Easy Plaza, Instagram, different levels of scams, and this is not counterfeits because you cannot find this, and these are just scams. People are literally stealing money from people. This is a very good example how we and the companies are actually working with law enforcement. This is a phishing website for this domain has been seized by ICE. I think we can hear a little bit about that later on. We're working with different law enforcement. We can, besides taking down, this was actually found in some case of US jurisdiction and was with court order was seized and taken down. Obviously, I've talked about health. It's just health and public safety can vary. So this is, for example, a company called Polygen, and we found that unauthorized sales, counterfeits, and God knows which products are imitating to be this Polygen, which are our customers' goods, and we managed to take down like hundreds of them in a single month. And this can be really, this can hurt people, all right? Whether it's skin, whether health. So these scams, phishing comes from different angles. Another different kind of scam, it's kind of C-level impersonation. For financial institutions, we help sometimes people and high-level executives to protect themselves, because this CEO we found for him 266 impersonation accounts on a single month, and we took down all of them: LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. And you think that it's not common? I'm sure that you know this guy. And on a single scan, we found 241 impersonating users on Facebook alone, 392 impersonating using on VK, which is a Russian social media, right? Instagram, LinkedIn. He doesn't, by the way, Elon Musk doesn't do anything to protect the public from people that impersonated him. And these impersonations on social media are used to create a complete scheme for fooling people, all right, for scamming people. They message them, they ask for Bitcoin or for Ether. It's happening all the time. Talking about Bitcoin, Dogecoin, sure, you've heard about it. These are some examples that we found throughout technology of different websites that are imitating to be Bitcoin or Dogecoin. All of them got user password. This is phishing per se, all right? Really. You can see that the lookalike domains like Dogecoin Faucet, etc. It happens all the time. And in some other aspect, we ran a little kind of research on travel and hospitality, right? So you can see how this American Airlines Twitter is totally fake. The same goes with JetBlue, Airbnb. These are all phishing, fake websites that are out there stealing money for people. I don't think that there is any other way to describe it. This is just another example of how American Airlines, and this is kind of elaborate a scam. This is a website connected to, and the people that the registrant is called John Wilson, and he created a fake LinkedIn profile, and he's like imitated to be a captain at American Airlines, and this is all connected. So hard to track this. And another example is Bang & Olufsen consumer goods that we're helping them finding a very holistic website, marketplaces, social media. So just to summarize, and I think that kind of the message resonates with other speakers that will follow me or were previously, is counterfeit, illicit trade, scams, fraud, phishing, faxes, emails, websites, social media. These are different tactics, but the same problem. We saw a huge surge in online scams during the COVID-19. Not to fight back is not an option. And we know, because we help our customers for years, that persistence is the name of the game. If you fight it, it helps. The bad guys just move to the other place. So this is part of any liability of different companies and brands and people. And consumers should be suspicious. And I think education is a key element here in the success. And I think that we all have responsibility to convey this message and make sure that people are aware of it. Right?
Excellent. Thanks so much. And before we go to Matt, you've got a questions button right there. Some of you are already using it. If you hear something, if Ty said something you want to follow up on, as I do, go ahead and post your question. And then when we get done with Matt here, we'll do a question and answer. We'll go back to everybody to participate on the questions, but use the question button. And then we're going to come to you so you can ask the question yourself. So I'll give you a shout out. Speaking of shout outs, I think it's safe to say that Matt Albans' current gig as the spokesperson for USA-IT is slightly easier than his previous gig as the acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And Matt, if you want to throw anything in about what we're seeing right now, obviously the border is, it's always news, but it's rarely been news like this. I also think it's interesting the number of times that I've seen research that show the connections between what people are doing in the cyber world that's criminal, and then what they're doing through border crossing that's criminal. There appears to be a symbiotic relationship between the two. Is that true? Am I wrong? Am I right? Take it away, Matt Albans at USA-IT.
Hey, thanks, Mike, for having me, and appreciate being able to back clean up here after that distinguished list of experts that went before. Pick and choose the little pieces I want to pick on and kind of address. And one of the things you mentioned, Mike, is just that with regard to this cross-border crime. Obviously, most of these counterfeit goods are not being produced here in the United States. They're being produced elsewhere, generally in China and Asia. And so they're transiting around the world to come into the United States. And a lot of that does come across the border, whether it's a land border or a sea border. But a lot of it comes now through the mail, through the consignment facilities. So whether it's UPS, Postal Service, DHL, any of these places, there are all sorts of vulnerabilities that exist within that supply chain with regard to getting these counterfeit products out into the marketplace. And those are all various things where law enforcement is trying to address and make investments into those areas, as well as corporate America as well, with regard to investing into securing not only the supply chains, but also securing the brand integrity that they seek to maintain for economic purposes. And Bill and Itai talked a lot about the economic impact to companies, and Hernan touched a little bit about economic impact onto governments that are dependent upon the tax revenue from legitimate trade and legitimate businesses. But there's also a huge impact to public security, public safety, and national security that stems from the result, because a lot of this money is going to fund these transnational criminal organizations. And most of these organizations do not just specialize in one or two types of crime. They're not just peddling fake Viagra or, fake Gucci purses. They are using those funds to support all sorts of other much more nefarious criminal activity from a public safety and national security standpoint. When you start looking at narcotics trafficking, human trafficking. Look at human trafficking. It's estimated to be $150 billion a year industry. And these smuggling routes and these smuggling organizations that have these shadowy networks utilize those exact same networks that they use to produce, manufacture, and distribute counterfeit goods that they do to move human beings. And unfortunately, they treat them just the same. These are ruthless criminal organizations. They do not care about individuals or people, whether it's the people that are utilizing their products on the back end, and whether they're fake medications, fake drugs, or drugs that are laced with all sorts of God knows what chemicals. I mean, we see what fentanyl's done to this country, and a lot of that is coming in. People are unknowingly taking it because it's placed into things and they don't expect it to be there. There's been links time and time again between the sale of counterfeit goods or stolen cigarettes to terrorist organizations, Hezbollah, ISIS, Al Qaeda, to the drug cartels down in Mexico and in Central and South America, all tied in, making profits or leveraging those profits from these counterfeit goods, this illicit trade, and using it to further their other criminal activities or terrorist activities. So that's really the critical. It's not just the loss to businesses and to economies, which certainly are very important in their own right, but the public safety and national security implications stemming from this illegal trade are quite dangerous for communities. And it's not a victimless crime, which a lot of times people will think, oh, it's just some guy on the street selling fake Rolexes for $25. No, that money and the funds from all of that go into really, really bad people that are wanting to do really, really bad things. One of the things that Itai mentioned, which is really important, I think, to highlight is the education. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with the USA-IT campaign, is to educate the public. I think the public got a very good view as to the ruthlessness of these criminal organizations, the dangerousness of counterfeit or fake goods being sold on the internet and other platforms during the COVID-19 pandemic. And obviously we're talking about the initiation of the pandemic, as there's things that are still occurring with that, clearly. But people just in the PPE environment, people trying to get PPE at the beginning of the pandemic, trying to protect their families and their loved ones, and were getting scammed left and right, whether they were getting scammed by buying something that was completely junk and didn't do what it said it was going to do, probably manufactured with a bunch of chemicals that could hurt them worse than the COVID-19 itself, to completely being stolen had their identity stolen and robbed via these online marketplaces that were completely fraudulent, like were previously pointed out. And all they were doing was stealing the individual's information, their PII, their credit card information, their social security numbers, all sorts of information that's then being turned around and stolen. And these people are being victimized twice. And one of the most dangerous aspects and disturbing aspects, and shows the ruthlessness of these criminal organizations, is the fact that some of this PPE was destined for the hands of first responders. So whether they're doctors and nurses and cops and firefighters and others on the front lines that are out there putting their lives on the line, just doing their jobs and being heroes just for doing what they do on a daily basis, they're utilizing PPE that they think is going to help give them an extra layer of protection against the disease, and ultimately they're using stuff that's fraudulent and fake, and so they're really being put in double jeopardy as a result of these criminal organizations. And again, these organizations don't care. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. They don't care about our families or our children. They don't care about the people that utilize their goods or whose information is stolen. They care about the bottom line, and that is money. And that's why it's so important that we have these public-private partnerships like we have with USA-IT. But there's only so much law enforcement can do. There's only so many resources that law enforcement has. ICE is a primary agency that has that authority based on its customs authority, but they're responsible for enforcing over 400 laws, and they have a few other things going on as well, as you alluded to, Mike. But that's why you've seen corporate America make such investments, and that's why these partnerships are great, because these criminal networks, the only way to counteract them and go against them is to have our own network, and that's a network of public-private partnerships where we're sharing information, we're sharing resources, and we're working together to combat these criminal organizations that are committing these crimes and trying to keep our community safe for everybody. So I'll leave it at that so we have some time for questions. I appreciate you having me here today and look forward to it.
And so I'd ask our panelists to turn their cameras back on so we can everybody can join us here. And before I go to Damian Fisher, who has a question, one of our questioners had to go, but left this question from the mortgage note where they cover the finance side because they were interested in your comments about Bitcoin. There's been several news stories recently that more traditional businesses are going to be getting in the Bitcoin business, including you can pay your monthly rent or house payment with Bitcoin. What does the expansion of Bitcoin mean? Most of the readers of our newspapers, et cetera, they're not going to Bitcoin something. They don't even know, what the heck it is. Should they care? Is this a real problem? And what would you say to regulators as they consider expanding the role that Bitcoin can play in, buying Amazon stuff and other online activity? Anyone?
Yeah, but if I may, Mike. Bitcoin is just, it's just like money, right? Paying by Bitcoin or paying by others, the scams can be done anyway. It can be done with checks, with checks in the mail, with wire transfer, PayPals, credit cards. Bitcoin is just hard to track. The most, or any cryptocurrency, all right? Once you send it, it's gone. You don't have anyone to talk to. That's the whole idea. So I think it definitely raises the level of risk that the regular consumer might be exposed to. Just brings back to education. All right. So you need to. We have some kind of guidelines for people. So if you don't know it, don't deal with it. If you don't know the email, don't open it. If you don't know this, if you're not sure that this is the right, always check the URL. If it's not super, looks super kosher, don't deal with it. All right. Avoid everything that looks fishy, smells like something that is not. Usually, if it's a duck, it goes like a duck. It's a duck, So, but definitely, cryptocurrency brings another element. First of all, buying them can be risky. Like we've seen how many websites we are actually working with many financial organizations and crypto exchanges. All right, the number of fake websites that impersonate to the regular exchanges is mind-blowing. We're taking hundreds and hundreds of fake entities every day. So yes, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, raise the level of risk that the average consumer is exposed to.
Okay, let's go to Damian Fisher with the New Hampshire Journal. He has a question. Damian, go ahead.
Hi, Mike. Can you guys hear me?
You sound great. Go right ahead.
Okay. The town of Peterborough recently lost more than $2 million to a cybercrime where the scammers were spoofing emails and tricking the town employees into sending them regular payments. Something similar happened to the city of Nashua where they lost about $41,000. What can these local officials do to protect themselves and to fight back, as you say?
Go ahead, Bill.
We're located up in New Hampshire too, so we were well aware of what happened with Peterborough and some of the other towns that are up here. There's the insurance broker up here for all state municipalities is Primex, and they have I was very impressed with their network of cyber response and cyber protections that go through the Primex system. They need to, these towns need to be working close with Primex up in the state of New Hampshire specifically. And once they feel that there's been a breach, they need to contact law enforcement, both the local, state, and federal authorities to jump on that as soon as possible, because the time is of the essence, when there is a breach like that.
Well, let me ask you a question, because we've seen this, the ransomware stories. I think was it Baltimore that got hit with the really bad ransomware? And then this was apparently a different scam. It was a, hey, here's an invoice you didn't pay. It kept getting the invoice paid over and over again. What can, whether it's a company or whether it's a small town that doesn't have a lot of money, what can they do to protect themselves from these kinds of scams?
Again, if I could jump in, I think, look, you need to scrutinize every single one of those requests for payment, because a lot of times the bad guys will use lower amounts, and depending on your network, sometimes it won't flag it because it is a smaller amount, whatever that amount or threshold it is. So you need to, every single one of those, you need to scrutinize. And there's no harm in getting on the phone and talking to people. So we're in the cyber age now where everyone's afraid to talk to anyone else. Just get on the phone and verify, why are you asking for this payment? And verify it.
I have a broader question before we go to Linda's question, which is, do you think that companies, entities, towns should pay ransom for these ransomware attacks? Or do you think that they should simply refuse and eat it and go back, spend the money to rebuild their database, et cetera, et cetera? Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think the investment really needs to take place on the front end, right? I mean, that's the key. The vigilance needs to be done on the front end so that these ransomware events don't happen, right? You keep emboldening people by paying these ransomware, the fines and the fees to get out of the situation that you're in, but you're better off making the investment on the front end to prevent those from happening at all, right? And that's coordination. Again, it goes back to coordinating with law enforcement, coordinating with entities that do this for a living, that help you. A lot of it's vigilance. I mean, a lot of it comes down to laziness. People, and Bill was kind of didn't say it, but I'll say, people clicking on things that come in that they don't know what it is, and then just responding to it because, well, it's an email or it's a text and it looks legitimate. You got to be vigilant, and you have to teach employees and either whether they're municipalities or government employees or city employees or private employees and companies to be vigilant and understand these things. There's plenty of material that's out there with regard to providing education and learning how to responsibly use the internet and the like. You just have to avail yourselves of it, and it does take time and it does take effort, and everybody's is busy and has other responsibilities. But one of these events, as we've seen, can have much more detrimental effects to a company or a business than taking time out to make an investment on the front end and prevent this stuff from happening in the first place.
Let's go to Linda's.
If I can jump in real quick, back up your files. If you have good backups, you can get back up and running in a quick, short order. So that's my advice.
Let's go to Linda Stein at Delaware Valley Journal. Linda, go right ahead with your question.
Hi, what can ordinary people do to protect themselves from counterfeit dark web products, and are there key things for them to watch out for?
Matt?
I mean, I think it's a matter of scrutiny. As for as sophisticated as these criminal organizations are when it comes to being nimble organizations and making a lot of money, they're also not necessarily the most sophisticated individuals when it comes to these products. If you look at the products, if you're able to see a product online and look at it, especially if you're talking about a medication or something that has some sort of labeling on it, you can look and scrutinize that label and see what it is, right? And you could read, and most times there's going to be words that are misspelled, or there's going to be English that is completely off. That if it was legitimate, it's true. The legitimate manufacturer is not going to write their warning about this medication and how to properly use it in broken English or no punctuation or with 4 misspelled words, right? And part of it too is also just, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, right? If there's a product that goes on the open market that's $100 and you go to 5 different websites that are legitimate sites, and and whether they're a store website, an online platform, whatever, and it's $100 and you find someplace else that's selling you for $35, there's something wrong there. right? And that's and I think a lot of people are being taken advantage of because, understandably, funds are short.
Let me interrupt there because there's a new aspect that we've discovered this in part of the COVID response, which is people are desperately looking for things that are hard to find, and then they've opened this pipeline. That is using Amazon and eBay as the pipelines for this. Is it true that there's a lot of counterfeit activity going on, and do you think the retailers should do more? And I mean, my elderly parents are on Amazon all the time. My dad is constantly getting boxes and opening up and going, "Who ordered this?" So they're gonna find scams. They don't remember what they ordered. So is that true? I think we referenced the Wall Street Journal story that said that at CVS their theft is up 30%, and they've uncovered these gangs that literally go out and shop for stuff that they know will sell well on eBay and Amazon. And they, so it's whatever, it's nail polish. It would normally be $25 and they sell it for 15, and it's the real thing because they just stole it from a CVS on a camera because no one will stop them from shoplifting in California. So is that real? Has that become part of the cyber crime world?
I can't even start to describe the amount of I've read research that 30% of the things that are sold on Amazon are counterfeits. All right, Amazon is huge. All the marketplaces, Amazon, eBay, we take down tens of thousands of listings a month on various marketplaces, which are counterfeits, which are unauthorized sales, which are illicit trade. With policy policy issue, expiration stuff. We're doing a lot of work with pharmaceutical companies, and this is literally, endanger your life, right? So I think, as Matt said, if it's too hard to believe it's true, it is not true. It is walk away, right? If this is a $100 product, you should buy it. $100, and better do it with the official channel in the right place, and better check this is the right shop on Amazon. And if you go to the website, check if this is the right domain. Just avoid all this strange Punicode IDNs that in the domains. Check Amazon and other marketplaces are one of the biggest channels in the supply chain, all right, that just like Bill said, that gets the stuff to the consumers. This is how they monetize, all right. So the criminal stuff is done behind the scenes in various places in various ways. You need to monetize the way, and the way to do this is to sell to the consumers, to the regular person. Check out, watch out. This is where the stuff going on.
And if I can jump in here real quick, especially when you're dealing with pharmaceutical type things that could hurt you. If you buy a bogus purse, it's not gonna kill you. But when you're dealing with your health and safety, that's you really got to be careful.
We're wrapping up here, so I want to just go around the table. If the economy starts to struggle, is that a sign that we're going to see more of this, or will that limit people's activity, and so then it's going to pull back? To the criminals, are they if we have inflation, in the regular economy, is it going to impact it, and what should we expect to see? And also, Matt, if you could throw in a comment or two about current events at the border, just because, well, you used to head ICE, and so we've got you here for newsmakers, so make a little news.
Well, to your first question, look, I think there's always going to be a situation that people are going to be, I do it, you do it, everybody here that's on this call does it, right? They're trying to find the best deal and make their limited dollars go as far as they possibly can. And again, there's ways to do that are legitimate and that are safe and secure, and there's ways to avoid being victimized or participating in these activities, which ultimately are not going to get you the product that you wanted to get in the first place, because it's going to be of lesser quality and potentially dangerous to you, as Bill mentioned, if you're talking about pharmaceuticals or something along those lines. So, those are things you have to contend with. But I mean, what you're seeing sold now, right, is a lot of basic necessities. So whether it's not, there's some luxury items and purses and watches, but a lot of people are buying general necessities and groceries and things like that across the internet platform. So, I mean, people are never going to stop buying necessities, recession or not, right? So it just does these criminal organizations are nimble. We saw how quickly they went from producing all sorts of other counterfeit goods to producing counterfeit PPE within a matter of weeks. We saw when the vaccine came out that within weeks there were fake vaccines flooding the marketplace. So they are nimble. They don't have bureaucracies like the government does. They don't have OSHA. They don't have child labor laws. So there's all sorts of things that they do to be nimble.